Hi, everyone. So, in 3 days, the US elections are going to happen 5th of November 2024. It's going to be a very important election for the United States of America. It's an important election for everyone. So, in just about 2 days, the United States of America will go into its most important election in a long, long time. It's Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. In July, when Donald Trump was shot upon by the shooter who was killed, and he got injured, his ear was injured. Everyone thought that Donald Trump is going to struggle, and then Joe Biden dropped out, and Kamala Harris came in again. Everyone thought maybe Donald Trump is going to come into power again. August and September was really about Kamala Harris gaining strength, at least with the left liberal base, the Democrats in the US. There was a lot of commentary, there was a lot of media coverage, good media coverage for Kamala Harris, and she seemed to be making progress. And it seemed like Donald Trump was struggling. And remember, the two more attempts on his life were made, but he came out of it. And a friend of mine said, how do you defeat a guy who's just defeated death? Now that's the point. And suddenly in October, just like he did in 2016, Donald Trump is looking good in the polls. Now, the US system is a bit different from many others in the world. They have something called the Electoral College, which has 538 electors. Each state gets a certain number of electors. Whoever wins more votes in the election, that candidate gets all the electors on his side or her side. You need 272 to become the president of the United States. And it seems the current projections are that Donald Trump is on his way to crossing 300. Let's watch a clip here and things will become a little clearer.
Reports, which typically have shown Trump in the lead. However, this now marks the very first time in RCP's aggregate where we see Trump ahead in the national polls. He's ahead by 0.1%. However, this marks a significant time throughout this election cycle and even previous ones, because typically liberals are the ones who dominate when it comes to the popular vote. So with Trump ahead by 0.1%, that just means that if there is any left lean to these polls whatsoever, he's actually up ahead by much more than that 0.1.
Words talk, numbers scream, and these numbers are screaming that there has been a significant tightening on a national level. Will Trump win the popular vote? We think that there is a better than 50-50 chance, and rising, even as we're 5 days away, that he does.
Let's talk about early voting. We have some of the numbers that have come in, and we can see that when it comes to the west coast of the United States and the two main swing states that we're focusing on here, Arizona and Nevada, we can see that out of all of the ballots that have been requested, 23% have been submitted when it comes to Arizona. And of those, 42% come from the Republican side. Now, does this mean that all of those votes are going to go Republican? Possibly not. We're looking at about 90% of those are probably going to swing Republican. Likewise, to the 36% that have voted early for Democrats, about 90% of those will swing that way. Now, this marks a significant shift because, once again, when we look at prior elections, typically Democrats tend to dominate when it comes to early voting. When we go down to Nevada, we can see that it's a very similar story. Out of all of the 20% of early ballots that have been requested, 39% have been cast on the Republican side, versus when you look at the Democrats, 36%, so slightly in the lead there for the Republicans, and a total of 35% when it comes to the independents.
What's very interesting about this is we can make some interpretations. This translates to a 53-46. That's a 7-point spread. So that means in early voting, we believe that Donald Trump has about a 5-point lead in early voting, with about 2 points going for the alternative candidates, Libertarian and Green Party. This is better than the Republican Party has done in the last 4 elections on early voting, which means that the ground game for the Republicans is dramatically improved from the previous elections. Now, Election Day is a whole nother matter because it's all about turnout, who can get them out. But before we go there, let's look at more states on the early voting.
So when we compare this current election cycle to that of previous ones, we can see that there is a solid 9-point shift when it comes to Nevada. When you look at 2020 versus 2024, the Republicans are definitely making their mark when it comes to early voting, and very similar when it comes to Arizona as well.
And to break that down further for you, in 2020, Democrats had a 10 percentage point advantage on the early voting. Ballots that were returned registered to Democrats versus independents or Republicans. This year, the Republicans have a 7-point lead on that. So now look at the dramatic difference in there. That's a huge difference, and that is why when we do quantitative analysis of this, extrapolate a little bit, believe that Trump has about a 5-point lead in Arizona on early voting.
And so now we move over to the East Coast and we take a look at some of the other swing states over there, North Carolina and Georgia, two states that were very much affected by Hurricane Helene. And we were a little bit concerned about voter suppression that may be happening there due to these circumstances. However, early voting actually looks pretty promising. By comparison to previous election cycles, we can see that when it comes to North Carolina, they're actually split. Out of all of the 31 early voter ballots that have been requested and handed in, we can see that it is a deadlock between Republicans and Democrats, both split at 34%. And then when it comes to the independents, they are at 38% overall. Now, we move down to Georgia and we see that it's a very similar story. Republicans are ahead marginally, just by 1 point. We can see that out of 31% of early voter ballots that have been turned in, that Republicans are up 44% compared to Democrats 43%, and the independents are coming in at 29%.
So now let's go to the blue wall. Look at early voting up north where fall is upon us. It's starting to get chilly, but the voting is heating up. If you take a look, interesting in Wisconsin, 50% of the ballots returned, only 16% of the early ballots have been returned, but 50% of them are Republican registration, 33% Democrat. When you put the independents in there, it's 38. You take a little bit more than a 6-4 split here, that's 18 on this, 18 on 38, 48, 56. I think that's higher than it's going to be, but it's early days. But it also shows that in early voting, Donald Trump has a lead. Extrapolating the data, because we can't see inside these votes, but we can extrapolate them based on polling and historical voting trends by people who have registered Republican versus people registered Democrats, and the all-important independents. Likewise, when you go to Michigan, the independent split is even less pronounced, but when you take a closer look here, Michigan was seen to be a toss-up. Right now, Kamala Harris would have a bit of a lead, probably 2 points in Michigan in early voting when you take the independents and you extrapolate it all out. Actually, maybe a little more than that, maybe 2 to 3 points. Then
there is something called early voting, so people can walk up into the voting booth and cast a vote even before the 5th of November. They have to get registered and so on. From my understanding, every state has a different setup, so they have to kind of register for early voting and go there. The numbers from 2024 early voting are looking good for Donald Trump. And historically, Republicans have turned out more on the voting day, which is the November 5th this time. Now, this means that Kamala Harris is facing a lot of problems, or, it's going to be a tough ask for her to turn this election. Last time in 2020, Joe Biden won I would say, a narrow victory against Donald Trump, and it was contested because some of those states went on counting for days and days, because some states allow mail-in ballots for even after the election is over, and whatever, they have different rules in different counties, and we all saw what happened. Now, who's to say what was right and who was wrong? It didn't look good on the eyes. It didn't seem like a fair result, but that's what it was. Now, this time around, with a lot of illegals who have come in from the Mexican and the Canadian borders and elsewhere, a lot of people who are supporting the Republicans, who are supporting Donald Trump, were fearful that, how many million ballots will come in. But when you start getting 10, 15 point leads in the early polls, that sets you up for a really, really good fight, because it becomes very difficult for the other side to kind of have that many million ballots sent in. And obviously, the Republicans are also more organized on the ground. They are more careful with, what kind of mail-in ballots are coming in. Who's to say what will happen on 5th November? But one thing is certain, that this election is not a shoe-in for Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump can spring a surprise. If Donald Trump comes in, it'll really be good for, uh, ending some of the wars that are going on. Now, I'm not saying that all the wars will finish tomorrow, but at least he doesn't seem to be a guy who would want to have a lot of conflicts around the world. So, the Russia Ukraine war and the Israel Hamas conflict, Hezbollah conflict, Israel Iran proxy war, whatever, I think those can take pause. Of course, Donald Trump will come in with a lot of trade related issues. He could raise a lot of economic sanctions, or at least tariffs and so on. But that's for another day. Right now, as the projections are suggesting, I, for one, didn't expect Donald Trump to come in at all. I thought it's a shoe in for Kamala Harris, but doesn't look like that. And maybe there's a surprise in store for all of us. I will try and come back to you on the 5th of November as well, as the voting is going on, and we can track this as it happens, because this is pivotal for the world. And I'm sure if you're watching in America, you're really clued in and excited and fearful, whatever, whichever side you're on. So I want your comments, and correct me if I've got any of this wrong. I've looked at some of the US media reports to kind of share that this at this point Donald Trump looks like a good bet. So let me know, and if you like the video, please like it, subscribe, share with your friends and family. Thank you. Good night.